Hello everyone and welcome back. The first field that we are going to talk about is software development. Now, software development is a very broad area. We create all kinds of software for different purposes and each implementation is different. But at its core, there are a few activities that are common across any software development. There would always be a build phase, there would always be a testing phase, there would always be a requirement analysis phase, and each one of them would have certain deliverables. And we can enhance the productivity and quality of each of these stages by using generative AI. So let's talk about them first here, and then we will not limit ourselves to theory only. We will go to ChatGPT and I'll show you firsthand how to use them with some tips and prompts that you can use. So the first activity that we want to talk about is the build phase. Build phase is something that is the longest running phase in any software development, involves the most complex of logics implementation, and this is where most of the bugs comes. You have to debug it, solve for it, those sort of things. So how can generative AI help you in here? First of all, generative AI can help you in generating the code from scratch. So you can tell GPT to create a Python code for, let's say, creating two numbers, right? Or you can tell it to connect to a database and GPT will quickly generate that code for you. You can use most of it right away. You can customize it further using your parameters, but you have a good enough code to start with. Vice versa, we can also use it to fix errors in our code. So when you are developing the code, you run it, you encounter an error, you have to now debug it. You can paste that error message in GPT and it would suggest you what are the resolutions for that, how you can solve for it. Third bullet is you can use advice from generative AI to optimize performance. So think about, you have a SQL query that does something. You can paste that SQL query into GPT and it would give you suggestions on how to improve the overall performance. And lastly, for all the above ideas, you do not need to go to GPT or any other LLM. There are companies like GitHub and AWS that have created their own what we call as code companions. So there are utilities like GitHub Copilot, AWS Code Whisperer, and you can integrate them directly into your IDE and you would get recommendations right away on what should be the code, what is the error, those sort of things. And another big advantage of doing that is that you can choose to keep your data anonymous. Your code would not be shared with anybody. It would not be used for training the model. So some very common use cases that you can do with generative AI in the build phase. Now let's do one thing. Let's understand what are the benefits of these before we go ahead and try them out. So of course we are talking about improving the overall productivity, right? So obviously there would be a reduction in the manual effort, which translates into most cost saving. Another very big advantage is that it would enable developers across platform. So what it means is, imagine you are a Java developer, but you are now being asked to work on Python. So you are somebody who's great in doing code logics, but you are not very good in the Python syntax because you have never worked on Python, you have worked on Java. So you can ask GPT or GitHub Copilot or AWS Code Whisperer what you need and it will generate that code for you. So very quickly you can go from being a Java to a Python developer. Third point, it enables better code practice and documentation. So often we have seen that during development, there are code practices not followed or there is very little documentation that is done in the code. And you can instruct GPT to do all of these things in a better way so that you have a high quality code with better code practices and all details documented out. So let's go to ChatGPT and let's try out a few things here. So what I'm gonna tell ChatGPT is this. So I am telling it that you are an experienced Python developer and that is just to set the context. So we are creating a prompt in here. We are doing a sort of prompt engineering also. And the first thing we are doing in here is we are setting that context that, okay, you are an experienced Python developer. Now create an optimized code that is used for an enterprise application. And what it tells GPT is that, okay, you don't have to write a layman kind of a code. You have to write a code that, corresponds to enterprise level application, corresponds to big companies, big applications, those sort of things. Ensure the best practices, safety mechanisms, and proper documentation is followed. So what it means is you are telling GPT that, okay, put in all the best practices that you know, safety mechanisms that you know, proper documentation that you know. And remember, ChatGPT, like I mentioned, is trained on lots and lots of data. So it has a very good idea about what are the best practices. It has seen a lot of code snippets across different data that it has been trained on. It has identified safety mechanisms. It knows what is a good document, those sort of things. And it can bring all those things into this implementation. And finally, I tell it that generate me a code that connects to Postgres SQL Server and executes a query. So the end code that I want is something of a snippet that I can use to connect to a Postgres SQL Server. And I should also be able to run a query in there. So as you can see, it starts writing the code from get-go. And it is also telling me some basic things. So for example, you have to use this library, which is a popular library, and that's sort of a dependency, right? So it's calling out that dependency well in advance that, okay, I am using this library. It's a good library. Now you check it out whether you have to use it or you want to use something else, but this is what I am using, and it's an external library. That's why it's doing a very good job in calling it out very clearly in the beginning only. And then as you can see, it is listing down all the details in here that, okay, you have to put your DB name in here, you have to put the DB user in here, password in here, those sort of things. And that's a customizable code, right? I mean, of course, GPT does not know what is your database name, what is the user, what is the password. So it's telling you very clearly that, okay, this is where you have to put all these parameters. You have to enter the name here, username here, password in here, all those details. And as you can see, it's a very good code that it has created, right? Maybe not the best. Definitely there is ways to improve it further, right? And that's why I said in the beginning that this is a good place to start with. You can play around with this code, you can increase it further, but at a bare minimum level, ChatGPT does a very good job in giving you something to start with. There is try-catch blocks in here, right? So the exception handling is there. It's turning out a lot of print statements because we asked it to make the code friendly and more clear, best practiced. So it is putting all of those things in here. And the idea, guys, is that you can use this code and you can start building your application, right? It may need some modifications, right? And maybe it's using something that is no good, right? Maybe this library, although in this case this library is the best one that is out there, but let's say there is another library that you want to use, right? So you can switch to it, and even you can ask GPT that, okay, instead of using psychopg, can you give me the code based on this library, and it can do it, right? So the overall idea is that whenever we are writing the code, especially if we are somebody new to the industry, we always need an initial help to start with, right? We need a senior developer, we need a peer who can help us out, who can guide through the code at the initial level. And this is where this things comes in helpful. Now, this is just one glimpse of what can be done. You can likewise paste your code in here and ask GPT to tell you what is the solution. It would do it. You can ask it to convert Java code to Python. It would do it. You put in your SQL query and ask it to optimize the performance. It would do that, right? So all of this is possible. And like I said, by using code companions like GitHub Copilot or AWS Code Whisperer, you do not even need to come to GPT. You can integrate those utilities with your IDE like Eclipse or Visual Studio or PyCharm, whatever you are using, and you can get recommendations in your working environment itself. So again, in all, a very powerful use case of generative AI. And like I said, it can reduce a lot of manual effort in coding. It can make you cross-platform. So the Java guy can also now write Python code, right? And it's basically like a companion for you. It's like a peer. It's like a friend of yours in the company who's helping you out with the code. And then you can further refine on that code, make it more better, change it per your needs. Now, just a word of caution, be very careful pasting your organization code in here because this can go into the OpenAI model for further training. Be very careful that you are not pasting any passwords, any API keys, those sort of details in there, because all of this data is recorded and it is used for OpenAI training. All right, let's get back to the next use case, and this time we will talk about testing. So testing, guys, is one activity that is very important for software development. You need a thorough testing to have good applications, quality applications. But at the same time, it is also true that this is one activity where there is always time pressure, right? Testing usually comes after build, and by the time we get to that phase, there is a lot of time that has elapsed. There is a lot of pressure to release the product, and testing usually gets into always a kind of a time boxed activity, and let's get results quickly, why we are not testing this, why we are not doing that, those sort of things, right? So there are often misses in identifying testing scenarios, there are defect leakage, all those sort of things. So you can take help from generative AI in this case, and where it can help you is it can tell you test scenarios, right? And not just test scenarios, it can tell you detailed test cases with steps and all. And even you can go one step further and generate the automation script for it. So for example, you can tell it to generate a Selenium script for it, and we'll see that in a moment. But it can do that because just like we saw it generated Python code, here also it can generate a Selenium code. And the benefit of all that is that first and most important thing is we reduce scenario misses, we identify edge cases, and finally it leads to reduced manual effort, which is cost saving, and also we can expedite the overall testing cycle. So that means that you would now be in a position, coupled with this build automation and testing automation using GPT, you would now be in a position where your overall software development cycle would be expedited. So if I go to GPT just to show you an example, and what I'm gonna tell it is this, let me paste it in here. And it says you are a manual tester working on validating a web application. So again, I am setting a context for it just so that it knows what we are talking about, what role we are expecting GPT to play. We are asking it to play the role of a manual tester. And then we say that the application has a login page where user enters a login name, password, hits the sign in button. So I'm giving it very clear details that there are 3 fields. This is what the field names are. The name of the button is the sign in button. There is also an option for forgot login name and password. Can you generate test scenarios for this? So let's go ahead, let it do its magic. And as you can see, it has started generating out something. And it's churning out scenarios. It's giving me valid login, invalid login, empty credentials, SQL injection. So as you can see, from the moment go, it has started populating out details, right? And it's telling me very clearly that it's a functional use case, right? And whatever details I told it in, for example, if I told it very clearly that the name of the button is sign in button, so it uses those details, right? It's not like giving you random details. It's using what you have told it and then formulating the results based on that only. And as you can see, it is still continuing to generate it, and not just functional test cases. Now it is talking about security test scenarios also, right? It is talking about usability test scenarios also, all those things, right? And if you see it in here, it has generated very good test cases also, right? So it is not just sticking to the primary validation. It is also telling you things like that, okay, password should not be visible, right? When you type in the password, it should be masked, it should be star or dots. You should not be able to see the password. It also tells you that there is a session timeout functionality. So you leave it for some time, it would time out, those sort of things, right? So all in all, as you can see, it has generated good test cases. Right now, again, I would say that it's not something that you should blindly take and copy, right? Again, consider it as a first level output. Take a look at it, see that if there is something else that you can build on top of it, and how that can happen is because of your experience, right? That's where humans come in. Because of your experience, you know that, okay, this is one particular scenario that always fails in, right? For example, I have one guy in here whose email address has dual dots. So for example, at yahoo.co.in, right? So ChatGPT has not given those scenarios, but you, based on your experience, know that this is something that happens. So you can further add on to these test cases, right? This is all elementary, right? You can even put in more scenarios around accessibility, around performance, around timeout, those sort of things, right? Now, I'm not saying that these are scenarios that a human cannot think of. Of course we can do that, and we have been doing it for several years now, right? But again, the overall idea is that you should think of GPT as a companion, as a peer sitting next to you in the organization that is helping you with the initial details and lot of initial details, and you can further refine it, right? You can further tell it what do you need. Okay. So another thing that we can do is in here is we can ask it that, okay, can you generate a Selenium script for login, right? So we already saw that GPT is versed with programming. It knows how to write Python code and those sort of things. So it can generate you the Selenium script. Now for me, it is still generating it in Python because it knows from the previous question that I am somebody who works in Python. But you can also tell it that, okay, can you generate a Selenium script for Java? And it would generate those scripts in Java, right? And once it generates, right, you will see that it would contain all the X paths and all those things that you can replace with your actual values, and then you can again start using it, right? So it's importing all the libraries, and then it tells you that, okay, you can put the URL in here, you can put the username, and it tells you that, okay, replace the following variables with your actual details so that you know where things have to be changed. And then driver, web driver, Chrome driver, all these sort of things, right? So it's generating those scripts. And again, like I said, you would have a handy code that you can use it, that you can customize further, and lot of your initial manual effort, it is reduced. Okay. So if I go back to the slide again, let's talk about the next use case, and that is requirement gathering. So if you're familiar about Agile, we need to define our requirements in multiple stages, right? If you are building a product, if you are enhancing a product, the first step is to define the requirements that you have to do. And that requirement definition happens in multiple stages. First, we need to generate high-level requirements that we call as epics. Then we need to generate individual user stories for those epics. And we also need to add finer details in those that are called as acceptance criteria. So it's an entire manual process that business analysts do today. But as you can understand, we are talking about text in here. So something where ChatGPT and generative AI comes in very helpful. We can ask it to define epics. We can ask it to define user stories, acceptance criteria, and that will help increase the overall coverage. It will save you effort, and best of all, it would expedite the overall development cycle for it. So let me run it and then I'll explain you what I said. I just gave it a very small context, right? So I just wanted to prove that it's not always necessary to write good lengthy amount of inputs. Of course, if you give it lengthy inputs, it would better for you. It would give you more better results, more specific results, right? But here I have given it a very simple, just one liner that, okay, you are a business analyst, generate the epics, and I want to create an e-commerce website like Amazon. And again, it has started writing these epics. It's talking about user account management, product management, search and navigation, all those things, right? So again, the idea is that you can pick on these and you can, further go ahead and write more detailed stories based on that and those sort of things, right? So again, the overall idea is to get something to start with from a experienced peer and those somebody else working in the company. Think of GPT like that person, and then you can further refine on it, suit it to your needs. And as you can see in here, there is a very wide coverage that it is talking about, right? So that's also one very good advantage, right? Now remember, it is telling you it is telling you about user account management, product management, search. It's also talking about payment gateway integration. It's always talking about customer service and support. It's talking about vendor management, marketing, analytics, right? So these are tasks that usually one person does not know about, right? I mean, what we are seeing in here are 5 different areas, and you may need 5 different people to cover all those areas, right? But because ChatGPT has been trained on so many documents, right? It knows all of this. It knows that there are aspects of customer support also that are involved in a product. It knows aspects of marketing that are involved in a product, right? Now, I being a business analyst, maybe my focus area is only on functionality. I know how search works, I know how product management works, but I do not know how analytics and reporting works or marketing and promotion works, right? Because I have never worked in that area. But GPT, based on its training, it knows that these are also areas that are required in a e-commerce platform, and that's why it is telling you all these details from the beginning, right? So again, think about the potential of generative AI and how big of a variety it is providing you, right? And you can further go ahead and ask it in detail, and maybe that's something I would leave on to you to practice on. You can go ahead and further ask it that, okay, can you tell me stories for login logout functionality? Can you tell me acceptance criteria for these stories? Those sort of things. And again, this is all text, so you will see ChatGPT doing a very good job for you, giving you a very good initial version that you can further refine on. Okay, let's go back to the slide and let's talk about the last case, documentation. So again, documentation is something that is, very repetitive activity. We generate all sorts of documents, requirement document, test report, user guide, operational documents, all those things, right? And what we have seen so far, generative AI is capable of producing great text content. So why not use it to fasten the documentation stage and save manual effort, right? There is lot of domain, lot of company requirement, and you have to churn out tons and tons of document, and LLM can save you time in there, right? As a developer, as a tester, we want to spend most of our time on doing the actual work of coding or executing test cases, right? We want to save time for us in documentation and use that time rather for good purposes, right? Again, does not mean documentation is not important. It is important, but it is a redundant activity. It is something that takes lot of manual effort, which can be better utilized elsewhere, right? So we can use LLMs, we can use ChatGPT, we can use generative AI to generate all those documents for us, and it would be a perfect time saver. Now, I am not going to demo this in ChatGPT. Again, this is something I'll leave up to you to try it out. So spend some time, play around with prompts, right? So maybe tell it that, okay, as a developer, can you show me the template for a system design document? I am a tester working on so and so application. My product involves testing on Chrome, on Edge, and I have to do these 50 different types of things. Can you generate a test plan for me? So play along with prompts, right? I mean, prompt engineering is something that you can use from day one to improve further on your results. So when you are trying these things on GPT, try to act on your prompt, try to make changes in your prompt and see how you can use it to get better results, right? And again, there is no one template that will work best for everybody, right? As I said multiple times during this video, generative AI is like a companion. It is like an experienced code developer, tester, business analyst who's sitting with you. It will give you the details, it will give you the ideas to get started with, and then you can expand on those sections. You can customize it, make it better based on the human experience. So go ahead and try it out, ask the questions, explore the possibilities that it has to offer, and once you are done, please move on and check out the next industry use case. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.